All right, I'm here with contributing writer Jake Fogelman. We're going to actually talk about one of your stories this week, Jake. You had a piece about Ukraine, right? The top ammo manufacturers, Remington, Federal, CCI, all these companies owned by Vista. They announced a new donation, right?
Yeah, that's right. So Vista Outdoors brands are back in the news, doing some fundraising for the Ukraine effort. This time, they just announced that they're sending a $100,000 check over to help with humanitarian aid, because as we know, there's been millions upon millions of civilians displaced because of the ongoing war effort. But they ran a T-shirt drive essentially in support of the Ukrainian effort. It was a big T-shirt with a flag that included Zelensky's famous quote, "I don't need a ride, I need ammo." And essentially they just said, if you want to support, all the proceeds to this are going to go to helping people displaced by the war effort. And this is less than 2 months, apparently. And this is what they've got so far. So.
Yeah, they announced that just fairly recently, that they were selling these T-shirts as a fundraiser. And I guess there was a pretty big response from customers, because, $100,000 off of T-shirts is pretty good. I mean, it's obviously not going to change the war effort or anything like that. It's not a huge amount of money, but for a T-shirt drive, it's a fairly big amount.
No, yeah, it's not life-changing money, but it is impressive that there was that much public support for this effort. Again, this is all customers voluntarily purchasing a T-shirt for the helping folks that are in trouble in Ukraine, and it just comes on the back of a lot of stuff that Vista Outdoors in particular has been fairly active in showing support. I think you had a piece a couple months ago about them donating millions of rounds of ammunition, which prompted other brands to jump in and start donating ammunition. So they've been fairly active in terms of providing aid to the invasion over there, to fighting off the invasion.
Yeah, I mean, they had a pre-existing, I guess, relationship with the Ukrainian military, so they were already supplying ammunition to them, and then they've also donated that extra 1 million rounds, and now they've had this fundraising drive that's, I guess, been successful, and they're donating to the humanitarian side of the effort in Ukraine, not the military side in this situation, right?
Yeah, that's right. It goes to this nonprofit, the Ukrainian Crisis Relief Fund. It's basically dedicated towards helping folks that have been either displaced within the country or folks that have been driven out of the country find shelter, get food, get clothing. So yeah, all humanitarian stuff is what the nonprofit's focused on.
Yeah, and like you said at the top, it's important because there's going to be a lot of people who need that aid. Right. Certainly a lot more than $100,000 worth of it, but there's millions of people still displaced in Ukraine, and that war is obviously not over. There's sort of dragging on as Russia tries to capture the western sections of the country and hold on to control of that as the Ukrainians try to push back. So the war certainly seems like it's probably going to drag on for quite a while there, and you're not going to see a quick resolution anytime soon, because frankly the Ukrainians fought off the quick invasion. It didn't work, and so now Russia has shifted tactics to more drawn out sort of effort. And but yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see how well Remington and Federal and these other brands have done in raising money through this T-shirt drive. But we also have some other industry news that we wanted to touch on a little bit here too, which is there's a new ATF report, right? Ben Marquis, one of our new writers, wrote this up for us. Apparently, the industry has grown tremendously over the last 2 decades. This new report covers the years between 2000 and 2020, and it shows incredible growth in the industry. I think he says in the piece that the report revealed domestically manufactured firearms have increased by 187%, firearms exported from the U.S. By 240%, and firearms imported to the U.S. by 350%. So, over 2 decades, the industry has just taken off.
Right.
And it's another piece of information that in this overall story we've been covering for months here at the Reload, right? With the growth in gun ownership. You've written a number of stories about that as well, right, Jake? Where we've seen all these signs that more people are buying more guns than ever before.
Yeah, no, this is, like you said, it's just an explosion in the firearms industry. It's the fact that domestic manufacturing's up, imports are up, exports are up. So the firearms industry's fingerprints are all over the commerce and weapons right now. This this stat right here is pretty interesting, just in terms of domestic manufacturing. In 2000, when the beginning of the report started, 3.9 million firearms were produced. And up to 2020, when the report ends, they had 11.3 million. So just about an 8 million firearm jump annually.
And that's crazy. Obviously population has grown over the same time period,
right?
Of course, this is important to keep in mind. But as Ben pointed out here, he did the math, and so in 2000 there were 1,397 new guns per 100,000 Americans. By 2020, it was 3,410 per 100,000. So that's it's a lot,
right? So even accounting for population growth, it's still a big boom in domestic firearms manufacturing for sure.
Right.
As you said, it ties in kind of to the trends we've been looking at, just the growth of shooting sports, the growth of interest in owning firearms. This coincides with the same time period where you started to see the majority of folks, when they would answer polls, say, hey, I'm looking to get a gun for protection. It overtook a lot of the other previously stated reasons, whether it was sport or hunting. So just a massive boom. It also coincided with the carry revolution too during these two decades. So all these things, sort of this confluence of factors, and you see it in the data, what's happened with the firearms industry responding to those changes among the general population.
Yeah, the ATF even comments in this report that pistols overtook long guns, rifles and shotguns, in terms of their popularity. Starting around 2009, which is also when the Supreme Court had ruled on two cases directly impacting the ownership of handguns, right? Heller and McDonald, which found that the Second Amendment protects an individual right to keep and bear arms, but that was specifically in the context of handgun ownership, right? DC had a total ban on handgun ownership. Chicago had a total ban on handgun ownership. And those two cases went in favor of gun rights activists, and then more people started buying handguns. So it's probably no coincidence there. And then those things that you just mentioned as well, the concealed carry revolution, the increase in ownership among new demographics, right? That's something that we've been tracking closely in more recent years, right? That's sort of taken off the last decade. And especially the last 2 years. And I think that comes into play a little bit in this report. Obviously, this stops at 2020, so doesn't include the last 2 years, or 2021 and 2022 at least. Right. And this has probably been even more of an impact because gun sales did not immediately fall off a cliff in 2021. So it's interesting to look at how that has progressed and how it impacts not only culture, but politics, right? Obviously that's our focus here at the Reload. And these things do have a significant impact, right? You probably wouldn't have that concealed carry revolution that you just mentioned, these changes in laws that have taken us from a time when concealed carry was completely outlawed in almost every state to a time where it's legal in every state. And most states now don't even require a permit to practice concealed carry if you're, not a prohibited person, right? If you can legally own a gun in most states now, you can legally carry it without having to obtain a permit first. And, and you see this in polling as well. This is something that you've written a lot about in recent months. The polling trends have moved away from gun control, and towards, less restrictive gun laws. So I think this is all part of that same trend. This is a macro trend. This is something that we are following as the big change in American culture and politics when it comes to guns.
Sure. No, I think you're absolutely right. You pointed out the fact that this could have serious ramifications on politics going forward. Like you said, we've already kind of seen some indications just based on polling. But it's almost a cliche at this point to say politics is downstream from culture. But as the culture shifts in such a way, clearly, firearms manufacturing doesn't just tool up like this because there's no demand. Clearly, they're responding to demand. And as the culture has shifted in all the ways you laid out in terms of concealed carry and personal protection, et cetera, I think that could have some very serious effects on the way we treat gun politics going forward. You're already starting to see that now. There's not a lot of movement at the federal level. It doesn't seem like there's a ton of appetite, despite what, there's sometimes some statements in favor of gun control, but there's really no serious push for gun control at the moment. So yeah, this will be an interesting thing to watch for sure going forward.
Yeah, I think so. I think the other trend that's interesting is it's not just more people buying guns, although clearly we've seen that. It does seem as though more people are buying more guns.
Right.
That having more than one gun is becoming more common among Americans. That would be something suggested by this, because we didn't see a threefold increase in gun ownership over this period necessarily, but we did see an increase in manufacturing to that degree.
Sure.
So it's interesting the way that the industry has been able to get people to buy more than one gun, or that collecting has become a more popular thing to do with firearms.
Sure.
There's perhaps a wider variety of firearms available now too, for all sorts of different purposes than there were in previous times. That probably plays into it. I'm sure culture plays into that as well. There's a lot of interesting things at play. We've certainly doesn't. I think you'll get people on the gun control side of things will try to explain away these numbers by saying it's all just super buyers, I think is what they call them. It's just small number of people buying way more guns than before, but I don't think that matches with the evidence we've seen the last several years. It's certainly been an increase in gun ownership as well. It's just also at the same time, you're seeing more gun owners buying more guns in addition to more people overall owning guns.
No, that's right.
That's the meta narrative that we're trying to follow here. That's what underlines everything else going on in gun politics, I think. And so this is another report. There's more in this report. I think we're going to have pieces on it soon. And then this was actually only the first of 4 of these reports that the ATF is going to put out. So we'll have more details from that moving forward here.